Hi everyone, my name is Ivan Hennestad and today I'll walk you through the Ephys Quickstart live script from the Brain Observatory toolbox for MATLAB. This short example demonstrates how to access and analyze NeuroPixels data from the VisualCoding dataset provided by the Allen Brain Observatory. In this session, we'll explore how to retrieve a list of available experimental sessions and filter this list based on specific experimental parameters. We'll examine individual session items. We'll view and analyze session units, as well as examining items linked to a session like the units, the probe, or the channel item. We will start by listing the available sessions of this data set. We will use the function bot.listSessions, providing VisualCoding and Ephys as input arguments. This will return a table of sessions from the VisualCoding NeuroPixels dataset. Other functions like list probes, list channels, and list units also exist for this dataset, and we'll come back to those a little bit later. For now, we have a list of sessions where each row represents the session and each column represents the property of that session. So for example, we have a session ID, we have the number of units and channels and probes for the session. We have the age, the biological sex, and the genotype of the mice, and we have the acronyms of the structures that are recorded from. We can scroll this table and explore the sessions interactively. And for example, we can see that for all of these sessions, there are hundreds and hundreds of units that are recorded. Now we can move on and we can use table indexing in MATLAB to filter the table. For example, in this example, we will select sessions from mice that are female with a genotype of wild type. And lastly, we'll select sessions that are designed to investigate functional connectivity. Applying this filtering leaves us with 3 sessions. We can now select one of the sessions from this table and examine it in more detail. We use the function called bot.getSessions to get the object representation of a session. In this example, we just select the last element of the filtered table above, sorted by the unit count. The object is called session under study, and it has a property called info. This info is a structure with all the information that we saw on the table above. Moving on, we can display the session object, and we see that it has a lot of different properties, not just the info structure that we saw above. For example, it has these linked items, and these are a table of items that are contained in this session, like probes, channels, and units. It also has linked file values, and these are properties that represent data of the session. These properties are on-demand properties, meaning that the data will only be downloaded from the remote repository or loaded into memory when requested. Next, let's take a look at the units table. The units table represents independent electrical sources that are computationally detected from the session recording. There's a lot of information, like one of the interesting columns is firing rate, but there's also a lot of different statistics about these units. We can use the summary function to compute the statistics for a table column, for example, the firing rate. We can see the minimum and the maximum and the medium firing rate. And we can also make a histogram of the firing rate of all the units. We see that most units have a very low firing rate, but very few units have firing rates up like 40 to 50, even 60 Hertz. Similar to how we did it for the session object above, we can also now move on and examine the unit in more detail. For example, we can filter the units table using the different table columns, and we can use the bot.getUnits function to get an object representation of a unit. That object representation has more properties that we can examine in more detail. It's also possible to do the same for probes. We can retrieve a probe table from the session that we're interested in, and then we can use the bot.getProbes function to get the probe object. And lastly, we can do the same for the channel item. We retrieve the channels table from the session object, and then we can use the bot.getChannels function to get information about the channel. Now you have seen how to list and filter sessions, retrieve more detailed information about the session, including data and linked items like units, probes, and channels. To learn more, I encourage you to explore the more in-depth tutorials and demos that are available. Thank you for listening, and I really hope that this quick overview inspires you to try out the toolbox and to dive deeper into the Allen Brain Observatory datasets.